Right, so welcome everybody. Thank you for joining us today for this special event. The event is organized by Archer, American Romanian Coalition for Human and Equal Rights. And for our panel today, we have a group of distinguished intellectuals whose fields of study intersect in interesting ways. I'm going to start with the introduction of Marius Turda, who is a professor of history specializing in the history of eugenics, race and biopolitics in Central and Eastern Europe. He is the author of several influential works, including In Search of the Perfect Romanian, which examines the intersections of national identity, racial degeneration, and social selection in modern Romania. A scholar with a deep focus on the history of ideas, Marius Turda's research sheds light on how Romania's intellectual and political elite shaped concepts of race and purity during the 19th and 20th centuries. He teaches at Oxford Brookes University in the UK. Welcome, Marius, and thank you for joining us.
Oh, thank you.
Our second guest is Cristina Bejan, who is a historian, playwright, poet, and scholar of Romanian culture and intellectual history. With a PhD from Oxford University, her work focuses on the cultural movements of interwar Romania, including the avant-garde and marginalized voices of intellectuals during this period. Cristina's writings and plays explore identity, memory, and social justice. She's also the author of Intellectuals and Fascism in the Interwar Romania. And currently she teaches at the University of Denver and is a prominent voice in the Romanian diaspora, engaging with questions of identity and resistance through both academic and artistic lenses. Welcome, Cristina. Last but not least, Adrian Furtuna is joining us from Bucharest, Romania. He is a sociologist and researcher with a focus on the history and contemporary struggles of Roma community in Romania. His research explores the marginalization and persecution of Roma people, particularly during the Holocaust and under communist regimes. Adrian's work has contributed significantly to raising awareness about Roma history, social exclusion, and systemic racism in Romania. He's affiliated with the Romanian Academic Institute of Applied Research and has published extensively on Roma identity, collective memory, and the challenges faced by Roma in post-communist Eastern Europe. Welcome, Adrian, and thank you for joining us. So our three speakers today have come together to shed light on Professor Turda's new book, În căutarea românului perfect, specific național, degenerare rasială și selecție socială în România modernă. In Search of the Perfect Romanian, National Specificity, Racial Degeneration, and Social Selection in Modern Romania, which unravels the intersection between eugenics and racism in Romanian nation building and analyzes the influence of interwar debates around eugenics and racism on socialist and post-socialist Romania. The event, as I mentioned earlier, is organized by Archer, American Romanian Coalition for Human and Equal Rights. My name is Mihaela Campion. I'm the president of the organization, and I'm joined today by Ana Hashbota, editor and blog writer for Archer, and Cristina and Crina Tarasi, our board secretary. I would like to extend our thanks and gratitude to Roxana Kazan, who is unable to be present with us today, for her contribution in organizing this event and for everything she does for the organization in her role of executive director. So we prepared a series of questions to ask you all, but please feel free to take this conversation in the direction you see fit. And we also want to allow the audience to participate in asking questions and making comments. I think it's very helpful for all of us to hear from you all. So let's start with the questions we have, and let's see where we'll go with this. So Anna, would you like to take over the questions?
Of course. Hello, everyone. Thank you so much, Mihaela, for the honor of letting me do this. Can everyone hear me well? Okay. So, as Mihaela said, we don't want to interrupt the flow of the conversation with the questions we have. We had a ton of questions, especially myself, related to the domain I'm interested in. So I'll start with a more general question regarding the general scope of the book. So, Professor Turda, your book explores the relentless search for definition of the national specificity in modern Romania. Could you elaborate for those less familiar with the topic? What was the role of eugenics in Romania's nation building efforts, and how were these pseudo-scientific ideas co-opted by political and social leaders to include or exclude certain population minorities? Thank you.
Oh, thank you. Well, firstly, let me say thank you to you and to Mihaela for organizing this. It's a real pleasure. And it's nice to see so many familiar faces there. And I look forward to this conversation. I don't think we have to be that formal. The subject itself is very serious. We don't need to overcompensate by being very serious ourselves. This is not to say, of course, we're not taking ourselves seriously. I'm just saying, being in a safe space here, we could actually think of ourselves a bit more freedom in terms of how we phrase and we discuss certain issues. Oh, that's exactly what I had in mind. A bit of entertaining coming from the outer space. Julius, probably you need to mute yourself. Yeah. No. Okay. So yes, the book, as some of you already know, basically tries to deal with what a number of scholars, not just me, consider to be the epitome of
I don't know if it's my connection, but I cannot hear Marius really well right now.
Of the debate about national character in Romania in particular, 18th century. And it continues to this. Can you not hear me?
Marius, I'm sorry.
Can you not hear me?
You. Yeah, we had a
You cannot hear me.
break here.
Okay. Do you think it's my connection? Because it seems fine here.
Yeah, it looks like a few of us lost you a little bit.
Oh, really?
Yeah. So if you would like to repeat, it would be great.
Okay. Can you hear me now? Yeah? Okay. Sorry about that. I don't know what happened. Yeah, one of those things. Okay. So as I was saying, the book is basically about national character in Romania, which is to say those debates which aim to explain what is that makes a Romanian Romanian. Can you hear me now? Okay. So this is, in a way, it's a very simple way of describing it. And I think this is the conversation that continues to animate the spirits in Romania. It really creates a lot of tension between Romanians and other citizens who are deemed by Romanians as being not perfect Romanians, such as ethnic minorities, particularly the Roma. It also creates a lot of tension within the master narratives about the national past. In other words, there is a lot of direct intervention in cultivating a sense of historical memory about events such as slavery, the Holocaust, the treatment of people under communism, people with disability, and certain ethnic minorities. And this is done in a way because, I argue in the book, we never had as a society the courage to come to terms with our difficult past. And because we're not healed as a society, we have so many open wounds, then it's very difficult for certain people to really create a conversation about delicate topics without really breaking apart the society and the conversation. So the reaction basically is one of complete annihilation of topics which are not comfortable for national historiographies. So, and this is clearly what happened with eugenics and racism. It's not about what I argue in the book, that we are not engaging with eugenics and racism. It's simply we consider eugenics and racism do not exist. So it's a completely different strategy that's being adopted by Romanian culture and Romanian historiography in particular. And I argue that to teach in this way about the national past is basically to teach a lie. It's not simply that we are not telling the truth, it's just simply we're hiding the truth. So in some contexts, you would say, well, you know, we're learning about the interwar period, but we're not learning about what this author said. In the Romanian case, what happened basically, an entire tradition of debating the national character has been completely eliminated from the public memory. So it's extremely difficult to go back and say, you know, we need to really address the centrality of race and racism in order to understand anti-Semitism, in order to understand anti-Roma racism, because it's not about rewriting the past and offering an alternative interpretation. Is really basically going back and telling the story how it was. We don't know the story. We know what happened afterwards, but we don't understand how exactly it became possible to reach such an intensity of hate towards other people in our society that a pogrom became possible, deportations became possible, the Holocaust became possible. So basically, to speak about the interwar Romanian culture in this way, I argue, is that without addressing the centrality of race and racism, is to teach a very distorted narrative about the historical past. And this is what I was trying to do. You see, I was trying to simply offer some stories there, which are not from high culture necessarily, but really crisscross within the Romanian culture in most diverse forms. You have philosophers, you have poets, you have scientists, you have simple people, you have newspapers, you have a lot of historical sources that actually suggest that we need to really rethink how the history of our country is being taught and how we're engaging with that. As I said, it's not about learning about race. In the Romanian case, we need to do two things. One, we need to learn about what happened in the past, to learn about racism and eugenics. But at the same time, what we need to do, which is very specific to Romania, we need to unlearn our racist ways. We need to unlearn our eugenic ways of looking at people with disabilities. So we need to do a simultaneous process of internal cleansing intellectually and civically as a society and as a nation, that operates on two levels. On the one hand, we need to learn, but at the same time, we need to unlearn things which are completely embedded in our institutions, in the way society works, in the way younger generation acts. And these silences that we are working with need to be exposed, and we need to free the space that's been occupied for so long by these master narratives that really, really took people out of history entirely. And we'll discuss it today, what happened with the Roma Holocaust, for example, what happened with the debate about people with disability and sterilization, and so on and so forth. So they were taken out of the context entirely. So we need to reoccupy that space. We need to rehumanize the conversation about the victims of an entire project, which basically aimed to create a society which was ideal in many ways. It never existed. To create a person, an ideal person, which never existed. But this is what nationalism does. You know, nationalism wants to create an ideal nation and creates a national community, whether real or imagined, into which you belong or don't belong. And if you don't belong, then you have serious problems how you engage with that kind of attitude when you live in a society which takes this kind of obligations based on ethnicity very seriously, rather than on civic obligations. So this is what the book is all about. It's a book not for specialists, it's a book for the general public. It might seem a bit difficult because of the amount of sources, but it's not designed to be addressing specialists who more or less should know by now a lot of this stuff, even if they don't know the details necessarily, or they don't construct the interpretation the way I do. But I think the public needs to know a bit more about it, and this is what I was trying to offer in this book.
Thank you so much. I love how you let the sources speak by themselves, and even if for a book for general public, which in general tend to offer answers, explanations, theories of why things happen, you kind of detach to yourself and let the authors present the realities as they unfolded. Next, I would like to move to our guest, Cristina Bejan, and ask her a few things about how she sees the topic of Marius' book intersect with her own work about the intellectual scene in interwar Romania. And if she wants, how does she feel that the racialized narratives around the perfect Romania influence certain artists or intellectuals from that period who weren't really matching that that ideal of Romanianness, true Romanianness. It's kind of
Well, thank you so much, Anna. Thank you, Mihaela, for having me. It is such an honor to share the stage with Marius and Adrian. This is an exposure moment. Marius was my mentor at Oxford. He's my DPhil mentor. It is really special to me to be part of this event with him. He means a lot to me. So full disclosure to everyone who doesn't know me, I am not a perfect Romanian. My dad is Romanian. My mom is American. I was born in the States during the Cold War. Romanian is my fourth language. And I have a disability, so I definitely would have been eliminated. And I want to clarify my job at the University of Denver. It is specifically in the Holocaust. So I'm the senior researcher on their Holocaust Survivor Project, documenting survivors with Colorado ties, meeting with the families of survivors here in Colorado. And I also teach the history of the Holocaust at the university. And of course, that includes Romania. So in terms of my own research, I know the implication is my history book. I published quite a lot on the Holocaust at the United States Holocaust Memorial Museum. But in terms of my book about interwar intellectuals, So the scene of my book, Intellectuals and Fascism in Interwar Romania, really is the cultural association criterion. And it's in that historical moment between 1932 and 34 that fascism really overtook, started to gain momentum in the country, and high-profile intellectuals such as Mircea Eliade, the most famous one, kind of got swept up in the political movement. But Criterion's a really great case study for this, because in 1932, all of these very different Romanians who had different identities, Armenian Americans, the Octarian family, Jewish Romanians, Mihail Sebastian, Eugen Ionescu, his mom was Jewish. And then my favorite, Petru Comănescu, educated in the States, I'm going to get back to that, but he was gay. And then that became this big scandal at the end of, like, part of Criterion's dissolution. So everybody was different in some way. And then Criterion collapsed because of this recruitment of the perfect Romanians in the group. And so then everyone at the end of this, who was not a perfect Romania, was on the outs. Of course, Mihail Sebastian probably being the most famous example. And we know this story from his Holocaust diary, from his journal, right? So you can read it all in there. So that's how Marius's most recent work, well, I would say his lifetime of contributions, but this book really plays out in the Criterion Association space. And we see those who don't fit that ideal. The association's ultimate collapse was this scandal surrounding homosexuality, accusing Comănescu and Mircea Vulcănescu, who ultimately did become a perfect Romanian because he was an agent in the Romanian Holocaust, right? But accusing these members of being gay in the Romanian journalistic space, in newspapers. And these attacks actually were, I would say, the main evil minds, the agents of hate, because they were just filled with so much hate, right? Were self-identifying Christian Orthodox figures in Bucharest, very proud. And it was the publication for that group, Credința, which was about promoting this Christian Orthodox ethic and a way of life. So you also have, you're not a perfect Romanian if you're gay, and you're not a perfect Romanian if you're not Christian Orthodox. And that's another way I'm not a perfect Romanian, because I'm Catholic. So that's it for me for now. I just want to say thank you so much.
Thank you, Cristina. Now let's turn to Adrian. Your research focuses on the Roma minority in its history in Romania. How did this theory of racial selection and racial degeneration discussed in Marius' book impact Roma population historically and implicitly? How these legacies manifest today even?
Thank you. Marius' book changes the narrative in the way in which Roma were labeled during the Holocaust in Romania. And you know that when someone is challenging or changing or even changing the historical narrative, is not something easy to be accepted in the public memory. One of the ways in which the social selection was applied regarding the Roma population, it was even the fact that were labeled for deportation two categories of Roma, all the nomads and from the settled Roma were selected for deportation. Those one considered without meanings for survival, without property. So in the historiography, this was considered like being a social-based deportation. I mean, it wasn't something racial. This was the narrative until now, and I think, like I said, Marius's work, it's related very much also with the memory of the Holocaust, especially I'm referring to the Roma Holocaust, because gives another understanding of what happened. For example, for me, it was difficult to explain to my daughter, for example, that 25,000 Roma were deported in the camps from Transnistria because they were thieves, because they were people without meanings for existence. So this is what Marius he's changing the narrative regarding the Roma Holocaust, and also when we refer to the historiography, the Romanian historiography that was written until now, and that I can say that it had a power in the way in which Roma were portrayed. So now I'm sorry to make this remark, but Roma were labeled like second-hand victims of the Holocaust. I'm saying this because Roma Holocaust was officially recognized in 1982 by the efforts of the activist Romani Rose in Germany. That was the moment when Germany officially recognized the Roma Holocaust. So the way in which the theories of racial selection and degeneration discussed in the Marius books, they are really important today, because until now it was really hard to demonstrate this with documents. And Marius, this is the thing that he do.
I agree. Thank you so much. It's a very important chapter of the book. It was the hardest to read for me, honestly. Thank you for your answer. I had another question for you, but you kind of like covered the basics of it. So I will turn to something that I was always expecting to see while going through the book, to read more about accounts of pushback, backlash against the eugenic movement from within scientific disciplines or public intellectuals, journalists, and most importantly, I was expecting to see that coming from the church and religious institutions. can you tell us what was the role of the Orthodox Church and the other other religious leaders in supporting, enabling the eugenic program, or maybe stopping it, or trying to putting a break on the evolution? And this question is addressed to the author of the book.
Okay, can you hear me? Right. Yeah, that's very interesting, and I'm happy you started by saying that we did expect to hear more voices protesting against the normativity of racism in Romania in the 1930s. And that's an important conversation because, as I show in the book, there were many people who were anti-racist scientists, like Grigore Popa, for example, or that sociologist from Iași, Petre Andrei, who actually committed suicide when the legionaries came to his house. So they were very much against German type of racism that certain Romanian intellectuals promoted, but they are no anti-eugenics. So this is very hard for a Romanian intellectual and historian to understand, because we don't have a culture of discussing these topics, to separate eugenics from racism. But at the time, of course, you could be pro-eugenics in terms of like looking at eugenics as a progressive ideology, a progressive theory of betterment, and something that Romania needs in order to become a modern country, but refute racism. So I did explain this in the book. There were also women who were eugenicists, but were very much against the eugenic society represented by Gheorghe Marinescu and others. There were also Romanian nationalists who were very feminist and racist. So there was no incompatibility in the 1920s between being a Romanian nationalist and feminist and a total racist. And, you know, you have women like Cantacuzino and Maria Băiulescu, so a lot of examples like that. So these voices, which are in a way part of the orchestra, they may seem dissonant to us today. They're very important because they reconstitute the entire overture of the interwar period. There are also a lot of Jewish eugenicists who are, of course, anti-racist, because they felt immediately attacked by Romanian anti-Semitism and Romanian racism, but they were very keen to promote eugenics through social hygiene, through public health. Of course, these sort of things were possible in the 1920s. They became increasingly difficult, as Cristina pointed out, even with very prominent intellectual figures in the 1930s, because Romanian nationalism goes very quickly into a very radical direction. And by 1940s, it's almost impossible to actually articulate any critique of Romanian biopolitics that actually doesn't work with the regime. So within that, you would expect, of course, the church to really articulate a counter-narrative, considering that this is a very, sort of, on the one hand, very secular ideology based on Darwinism and evolution and all these sort of scientific theories. On the other hand, it's a theory that actually tries to control the private life of individuals. So it has a direct interference with something which the church deems to be the private life. So no one should interfere with the private life of the citizens. So only God can do this, and not even the church should interfere. So there is a lot of critique of official top-down forms of biopolitics, particularly from the Catholic Church and the Greek Orthodox Church, which is basically, you know, the Uniat Church in Transylvania, which critiqued the Romanian state for trying to interfere too much in the life of citizens by controlling reproduction, by telling people who they should marry, by telling people how many children they should have. The Orthodox Church, however, tries a different approach, because the Orthodox Church relationship with Romanian nationalism is of a particular nature. And then it tries to offer a synergy, a synthesis between forms of Romanian racism that are acceptable by the church and kind of this almost transcendental mysticism that you could find in the texts of the legionary movement, but also you could find in the texts of certain eugenicists, which basically idolize the family and the blood of the nation as something completely eternal. And the Orthodox Church is basically, it's the place where the sacrality of the nation happens. So the state is where the life of the nation happens, as it were, in the biopolitic days. But within the confines of the church is where the immortality of the nation is being assured. So you have a conversation between certain theologians who are anti-racist, Orthodox theologians, and I give some examples in the book, who are trying to speak about a Christian eugenics represented by the Orthodox Church, which should go back to forms of, very interestingly, some of them form of very pagan philosophies, like, the ancient Greeks, in terms of eulogizing the healthy body. So they say, well, you look at the Romanian peasants, it's not enough to really talk about spirituality and morality. It's also, there is a need to fortify their bodies to physical exercise. And this priest gives the example of ancient Greece and the Olympic Games, So there's no incompatibility between a form of ultra-Orthodox nationalist Romanianness and going back to ancient Greece. But of course, there are other Romanian theologians, Orthodox theologians, who are, full-blown racists and anti-Semites. So some of the most radical examples of racism in Romania is actually provided not by Nae Ionescu or by Iuliu Moldovan or Făcăoaru, but by priests. They are to me, it was extremely important to put this in the book, but also it's extremely important for us to go back to this conversation and try to understand why religion needs that kind of affiliation with ideology and politics. And I'll give you one example. So this Liviu Stan, who's one of the most famous Orthodox theologians of the 20th century, he says it very simply: the moment you stop being Romanian, the moment you stop being a racist, you stop being a Romanian. So there's absolutely ontological synonymity between being a racist. So no mixing with the Jews, no mixing with the Roma. It explicitly talks about eliminating the Roma people and sterilizing all of them. So the moment you stop doing these sort of things, what you do basically, you don't allow yourself any eternal life as a Romanian. So you have this form of absolutely kind of mystical racism almost that really explodes in the 1930s and 40s in the writings of or sociologists or anthropologists and eugenicists, but it also seeps through like the rain does under the door of the big patriarchy in Bucharest and other places. It's contaminated with that. The Catholic reaction is in a way quite circumspect because of the political attitude the Catholic Church in general had towards eugenics. In 1931, with the introduction of Casti Canoni, which is a papal legal Christian marriage, basically the Catholic Church condemns officially euthanasia and compulsory sterilization. So all of the Greek Catholic intellectuals from Transylvania and majority of the eugenicists from Transylvania were basically uniats. For them, the discussion about sterilization and euthanasia in many ways was finished, because as a practiced Greek Catholic, you had to follow what the papal encyclical said. So obviously, this is very interesting. You hear people talking about Romanian eugenicists, but of course they don't understand that there is a big difference between someone who was from Transylvania or from the Banat and was a uniat, and you had to follow the precepts of the Catholic Church and the Greek Catholic Church regarding abortion, interruption of pregnancy, sterilization, basically everything that has to do with the interference of secular state-led institutions in the private life of individuals. And someone who was an Orthodox, who had absolutely no constraints whatsoever from the Orthodox Church in terms of what you could say, what can do. So this very minimal thing, which would allow us to offer a very nuanced understanding of the relationship between religion and eugenics in the Romanian context, it doesn't exist because people have not really understood that very basic distinction. And then, of course, you have Judaism as well, which has a very interesting relationship, particularly certain Yiddish writers who publish on eugenics very progressively in terms of sexual education, hygiene. They very avant-garde in many ways in the 1920s. But then, of course, they got, and there's a big debate about abortion in the 1920s, a big debate about abortion in Romanian parliament, And a lot of stuff, there is an interesting combination there from the point of view of what Judaism would allow to happen within the parameters of a society which allows the intervention and the control of reproduction in this way. So you see how many interesting aspects you have, and I try to put that in the book to show that kind of foundational moments and the very sobering understanding that many of these people are actually, particularly in the case of some Orthodox leaders of the church, they were not necessarily only attracted to political power, which they were. Of course, we know that, particularly in relationship to the Iron God. But they really wanted to be more than just that. They really bought into the entire biopolitical utopia of creating a perfect racial state for the Romanians, a state in which people with disability should not belong. People of inferior, as they said, race, like the Roma and the Jews, should not belong. And then somehow Orthodoxy will provide that kind of ultimate salvation of a purified ethnic body. That would be the transcendental moment of what Cioran called the transfiguration of Romania. So the ultimate transformation of Romania will happen not just spiritually, it will have to happen ontologically and anthropologically as well. We will literally become a new human being.
Thank you. Yeah, all these three levels are definitely intertwined, and it's interesting to see how they interact and legitimize each other, the religious with the scientific and anthropological observation. Now I want to ask a question it's addressed to all our guests. Thinking about this obsession with the racial purity and national specificity in the period analyzed by Marius, how do you think this still affects our society today? And if it does, in your opinion, and we can think about the larger context with our environment of ultranationalism and far-right populism in Europe, in Romania, and elsewhere. Let me know if the question is clear. Thank you. Who would like to start?
I would like to invite Adrian to start because he lives in Romania, so he knows better.
I think that regarding the national specificity, for me, reading the book and especially the chapter on Roma, one of the questions that I had all the time in my mind was that where is the place of the Roma in the Romanian national specificity? What place they have, taking in mind the 5 centuries of slavery, which left a huge legacy regarding the way in which the politicians, the intellectuals started to build the national project. What was the place for Roma? So I remember that immediately after the Great Union in 1918, also the Roma from Transylvania, they expressed their will and their interest to be politically represented. And they did this because all the ethnic minorities were doing the same. They were expressing the fact that they believe in the new national project and they want to take part. And also the Roma did this. And it's interesting because from all those ethnic minorities that manifested their will, all were represented in the new political project and even in the parliament. And regarding the Roma, they were not taken in consideration. So I think today that the narrative, it's something like, okay, but I mean, it's not so important that you are Roma. Finally, you are Romanian. This is the point, no? I mean, just still, it's today, it's hard to be accepted like having an identity, a different history. And I think that this was instrumentalized during the time by the old regimes. Because if I think to the interwar period when Roma started to express themselves from cultural point of view, even political, let's say. So when they had the possibility, they wanted to build also a project for their identity, linked with the Romanian identity because of the lack of political power. So I would say that we live the moment when Roma, after it's a short period from the revolution from 1989, we live the moment when we crystallize, I would say, ourselves like having an identity, and not only be included from a political point of view in the Romanian, in the big project of the national Romanian identity, and here the communist period also had a huge impact in the way in which we try to define ourselves from the point of identity.
Thank you so much. I really like this last observation on like starting to you guys agency and ownership over how to define your own identity, which was like robbed by all these movements a long time and during communism as well. Okay, Cristina.
Well, I would like to combine my answer to this with a later question, and then that'll give more time for Marius and Adrian. The later question is about basically the exportation of eugenics to the West, such as US. And I think the way to answer both of these questions is actually to look at the global Romanian national identity space, which is the internet. So as far as I'm concerned, these eugenic ideals and racist hatred have been exported to the West already through the Romanian diaspora. And I know, I'm not assuming, Marius and I connected yesterday and was able to share what's going on this side of the Atlantic. So I've, unfortunately see with my own eyes that the diaspora that's come since 2000, they live on Romanian internet, which is Facebook, WhatsApp, whatever, Instagram. And they're in this Romanian national space in the cybersphere. And they don't, I'm talking Colorado here. They don't actually integrate in American society. Their like minds are in Romanian land at all times. And unfortunately, that means that they are engaging in these racist conversations in the cybersphere, and we're talking cyberbullying and spreading hate. And so the example that manifested this summer, which I think is very relevant to our conversation because it includes both Romania and USA, is the Olympics and the scandal with the floor exercise and the bronze medal for the women's gymnastics at the very end of the Paris Olympics. And it was a scandal kicked up by a very famous Romanian named Nadia Comaneci. And an American had won the bronze. There was this scoring controversy, but the way it was handled was, in my opinion, full of hate. And I saw with my own eyes, as many Americans have seen, the racist attacks on the American gymnast Instagram page with the N-word and the word monkey. All over her Instagram, there were two Romanian young women, and the second one, I don't remember their names, hired influencers to attack Jordan Child's Instagram with all of this racist stuff. Okay, so if you think she still deserves the bronze, think about it. And the sister of the African-American one who was initially awarded it screenshotted all this. The proof is there, and it was in the American press that this was racist, because it is, duh. And what really struck me after seeing this on Instagram, seeing it all over Romanian diaspora Facebook in the United States, this language, okay? What really struck me was what Marius actually started the Zoom with saying, the complete denial of racism. There was no acknowledgement from any diplomatic party that racism was at play. It was just this self-righteous, we were wrong, we were the victims, we deserve to have the bronze medal. Well, of course we can be racist on Facebook because we deserve to win it. So of course we can, it was appalling. And in conclusion of this example of where I think it's all, where we are at in 2024 with this conversation, this is, in my opinion, a huge diplomatic crisis for Romania. It has been shamed on the world stage. It has lost complete respect in the United States because of this. And yet there is no conversation about this coming from Romanian officials. And it could all go away if somebody apologized. But of course, that's not going to happen because this denial, racism doesn't exist. So thank you. And then Adrian and Marius, you have the rest of the floor.
Yeah, I just want to add something to the response Adrian offered in relation to what's happening at the moment. In Romania, my reading is simply that in mainstream education in Romania is basically lacking in a serious engagement with these issues, and there is still a void. Basically, opening the drawer of history because they're completely scared in many ways that they might not like what they find. They might be displeased by the smell of rotten corpses. There might be needing to look in the mirror and accept that a self-critical engagement with yourself is needed in order to move forward. There's so many layers that you need to engage with. And you could see this with institutions. They never apologize for slavery. They never apologize properly for the Holocaust. There was the commemoration of the Holocaust a couple of days in Romania, and it was basically invisible on national televisions and major newspapers. This is the Jewish Holocaust, as Adrian pointed out. In Romania, in the mentality of intellectuals and the state, there is a distinction to be made between Jewish Holocaust and Roma Holocaust. They don't even call the Roma Holocaust as much as they don't call slavery. So to allow a Roma person to celebrate, commemorate, not celebrate, commemorate together with a Jewish person on the same day, it's seen as very odd and unusual, as if in 1944 or in 1943, a Romanian soldier or an ex-German soldier made a distinction when they shot both of them in the back of their head. However, we don't do that because there's such a element of this literature that's being produced for a century about what is to be Romanian, that completely eliminated, as I pointed out, any possibility for these people to be part of the national project. Ionescu, we talk a lot about Emil Cioran and we talk a lot about Ionescu, but interestingly, from all the books I read about Ionescu, the one question he actually raised is, to me, the summary of the entire conversation here. And he says it very simply: many of these people are good Romanians, but are they Romanians? Of course, a Roma person, a citizen, is a good Romanian because the Roma person pays taxes or behaves nicely on the street and doesn't spit. But is he Romanian or is she Romanian? That's the ultimate fundamental question. Ionescu was the first to really put it, because of course he had the problem with Sebastian. And he tried to explain to Sebastian, no matter how much he will try to become Romanian, he will never be Romanian. As a Jew, there is a fundamental ontological difference, and you will never become that perfect Romanian. So you need to stop doing that. And because he tried to come to terms with his disciple and the relationship he had with Sebastian, he formulated the quintessential question in Romanian culture. All of these people, I look around on Zoom now, you're good Romanians, or maybe good people, but are you, are you actually Romanian? Or are you actually people? If I were to use that example as a eugenicist, because you may have a disability, you may be sexually of a different orientation, you may be, short or too tall. Who defines the activity? What is the ideal person? And without engaging properly, younger generations today can actually behave in a very disturbing, to me at least. They seem to not know what happened in the past. They have a very truncated understanding of major events in Romanian history. They know very little about the slavery. They know very little about the Holocaust. They don't associate places with the memory of killings and murder, to the point that they could go on public and you hear Romanian politicians saying anti-Semitic and racist comments, or making racist comments in the public space. Quite shocking remarks. You have streets being named after famous anti-Semites. And so that is possible to happen. And then that kind of current is almost like, it's like a fluidity of ideas. They never go away. You could see that with the diaspora. Cristina answered that very well. And I know there are people here who live abroad. I mean, how, you become even more, in a way, racist. And I've seen this with people in London or in England, Romanians from Romania who are more radical in London than they were in Bucharest, because they felt that there is a need to defend the undefended, which is the ultimate Romanianness, as if anyone cares really about that. But when you feel that you are alone and depressed and things don't really go your way, and people consider you second-class citizen, or they treat you with disdain, then you really go back to what you think is your memory of beautiful Romania and the ultimate form of belonging, which is somewhere situated between the Apuseni Mountains and Maramuresh, ideally. And then you recreate this meoritic space in your head that allows you to survive the hardship of the day. But ultimately, it has very negative consequences. Cristina pointed out what it could lead to. It led to open racism towards an African-American athlete. I wasn't familiar with that episode she told me yesterday. You could see this in Spain and in England and Italy, countries which have significant diaspora, where there is a certain radicalism, almost, that it's on the fringe in Romania, but here it's quite acceptable, almost the smelling of legionarism and kind of Iron Guard nationalist feelings. And you're asking yourself, how is this possible? These are educated elites. They actually know better, but that's not the point. There's no incompatibility. And this is what I illustrate in the book very clearly. People think that the more educated you are, the more tolerant you are towards other people. Whilst what I demonstrate in the book, and there's the problem that we need to accept ourselves, the more Romania transformed itself into a nation state, the more Romania went through the process of modernization and turning and creating institutions and creating the infrastructure that you need to sustain a state. So everything happened. The more that happened, the less space was allowed for people who are different. The less space was allowed for the Roma because they were former slaves. The less space was allowed for people with disability because they couldn't conform to the normative definition. And that was the same in the inter period, and even more under communism, where we literally put people away because we could not see them. We didn't want to see these people, to the horrific outcomes that we all remember in the 1990s when we saw the orphanages of the Romanian, mostly Roma children, who basically terminated through an absolutely consistent program of extermination by the socialist state. So we didn't want to see that. We just put it away. So that kind of logic of annihilation that the state has, we need to fight. We fight it as a civil society, but we're also fighting with the tools of historical memory, by remembering things, by telling the stories of what happened, by assuming that past, by engaging with difficult topics.
Thank you. I think we had also the answer to Adina Maglan's question in the chat about the role of diaspora in
So
amplifying.
thank you so much for saying that, Anna, and thank you for all the, amazing presentation that we have. So I would like to remind everyone to post your questions and comments in the chat. We like to hear from you. I think it's going to be extremely helpful to have you engage in this conversation with our guest speakers today. So I think we have room for one more question, Anna, and then I will go to the chat and read your questions and comments to our panelists.
I think we can let our audience ask their questions if they want, or if there is any question our guest would like to answer in particular. Coming back to Cristina's answer, I had in mind like a more academic approach of like the role of exiles in the US, for instance. I first read about Sabin Manuile, who was one of the biggest Romanian demographers and statisticians, who moved to Stanford and worked at the National Census Bureau. And his work was very influential, and he and his wife were community organizers. And it's interesting to see how the work of such people would influence the way diasporic identification, myth building in diasporas further evolve. But I don't know, like, if there is any archival evidence for that. Okay. Does anyone? Yeah.
If you allow me, I would point something, because you mentioned Sabin Manuile, and it's very interesting to see how his name, it's connected today at the level of Romanian society. So in the village of Sâmbăteni in Arad County, where Sabin Manuel was born, the school in the locality bears his name. And an article from a newspaper entitled "The History of the Sabin Manuel General School in Sâmbăteni" shows one of the former students of whom the school is particularly proud is Sabin Manuel. In memory of this great man, at the request of the director, starting with September 2008, the school was named Sabin Manuel Sâmbăteni General School. So it's, I mean, Marius' book puts all these intellectuals together, and it's not only that it's challenging the narrative, but it shows how were put the pillars, the fundament of the nationalism, and also how, I mean, it forces you to question yourself in the way in which you saw the world until now. And one of my questions is how all this memory, how this an entire culture was deleted from the public memory, and even having today the opposite regarding these things that were produced.
I agree. Thank you so much.
Yeah, we could get some questions from the chat, but I want to highlight one point that I make in the book, and it connects to what Anna was saying about kind of the official or kind of the institutional type of arguments. What I want to highlight, and we want to get to that point to understand how this works. This sort of things doesn't happen just in the university seminar room or the laboratories of the Center for Research. In other words, we tend to look, and most of the work is being done on racism and eugenics in Romania as if it's just ideas that some people have or had. But there's very little understanding of the victims of eugenics and racism. The perspective, these were people who went out there and then put their ideas into, they affected the lives of those who were their object of studies. So Manuela, Kielcha, Stan, and all of these people, all the way up to Antonescu, wasn't simply they were talking about, let's sterilize the Roma, let's create human zoos, or we put nomadic Roma so the population can come and look at them as if they're animals. They actually implemented that. So we need to really connect these two important vectors of historical memory. One, the lives of people who were affected by these ideas. Now, you could be someone with disability, or you could be someone or different ethnic origin. So these are the kind of the broad spectrum of how these people operating. And then secondly, of course, we need to not forget that the Holocaust did happen.
Thank you. That
I'm
was
Romania did contribute thousands of Roma people through various means. And
we have a question.
It's not as if we talk about our topic and it is witchcraft in the 14th century. Yeah, please go ahead.
Yeah, no, sorry about that. I
listening.
think it was another, breaking in your connection. There is a question from Marius Taba. What about comisiile de romanizare?
Yeah, very good question, Marius. And yeah, I did talk about that. They're very important in the 1940s. Their main purposes, you know, are about Jewish property, or the confiscation of Jewish property, and it directed at Jews. However, within that discussion about Romanization of businesses and the universities, in other words, creating the social, economic, cultural, ethnic space purely Romanian, is what these committees or commissions were doing. The Roma fit in very interestingly, and then when they start issuing certificates of you know, being racially Romanian, they give it to a number of people, not only Jews, but Changai, settlers, and Roma. So they operated initially directly for the Jewish population, but then they expanded. So I discussed this in the book. So you're absolutely right in pointing that out.
Okay. 2 questions from Julius Rostas.
Right.
One is, there are mainstream scholars nowadays who claim that eugenics and racism were marginal in the political and academic debates during the interwar period. What is your answer to such claims? And the second question, can you track any connections between post-war demography and the interwar eugenism?
Very good questions, Julius. Thank you. Yeah, I completely disagree, of course, with the idea that, and I demonstrate this in the book, not only that eugenics and racism were not marginal to debates, scientific, cultural, and political, but also I demonstrate how these ideas influence common people who basically reacted to eugenics and racism in certain ways, because ultimately, this is what we need to demonstrate, whether real people were affected by these ideas and in what way. Otherwise, it just simply was an intellectual conversation. Whether it is important or not, it all depends on the person who writes the book. So that's their decision to deny that. However, as I say, once you look at history, what happened, it's impossible to say that racism and eugenics are marginal, and then you have Holocaust and racism against the Roma throughout the 20th century to this day. So either you say there was no Holocaust, there's no racism against the Roma, and then I accept that eugenics and racism are marginal, or if we are dumbfounded by the prevalence of anti-Roma racism, by anti-Semitism, and by the Holocaust as an experience in Romanian history, then the only way to explain it is not just political intention from the Antonescu regime, but a more sustained reaction of the Romanians towards these people, which manifested eugenically as well as racially. Regarding the connections between post-war demography and interwar eugenics, they are very clear, in particular with certain people, which were integrated in the 1950s after their return. So if they haven't emigrated, as it happened with Manuel, some people like Traian Erseni, for example, and others, were reintegrated in the university network. They started working for the Institutes of Research produced by the new Romanian Academy in the 1950s. And then they reproduced the interwar debate about population, about the nation, within the confines of the socialist narrative about productivity, the new man, the new woman, and the new communist society. And I do allude in the last chapter of the book, I mentioned this, how you could have a eugenics with without racism in the early stages of socialism in Romania, exactly looking at these ideas. But this will require another book just to look at the communist period and then take all of this into account.
Thank you, Marius. A comment from Ionela, comment/question. I do not want to be a Romanian. When I present myself, I'm saying that I'm a Roma living in Romania. I'm a Roma woman. I am keeping what I received from my parents, and I will pass that to my son. It is challenging, but what was easy in our history?
Yeah, yeah, that's yeah, this kind of questions or comments when we all hear, not just me, but all of us here, and it connects to another question I see there about the cathartic feeling and how my reaction is twofold in many ways. On the one hand, and I said it once, after I finished this book, I really felt that I need a type of professional counseling. I've been working on eugenics and racism for 30 years, and I internalized so much bad language and so many expressions and dehumanizing terms about people that at some point I realized I'm just, filled to the brim of my intellectual tolerance of how much hate I can take as a human being from books and from reading about what happened in the past. So I really needed kind of a conversation with someone who could really allow that kind of toxicity to really get out of my body and my brain. And I can understand that in relation to what Ionela is saying, there's so much bad stuff in our lives, and some of it is our own doing. Some of that this is what the Romanians did to the Roma and the Jews, and that has to be dealt with. It has to be accepted, and it could only be done by confronting that. But at the same time, I always believe, maybe because I'm ultimately a profound optimist, but a total pessimist in other ways, that there is need for healing as a society, and that cannot happen. It cannot happen unless all of us would come together in accepting that the need for dialogue and for a reconciliation. So I think what you need to tell your son to make him a proud Roma person is to be proud of what he is, what he could become, and to be proud of his history. But at the same time, you need to tell him that this is a terrible past, the past that your ancestors were slaves and the Romanian state kept them in, chained like animals. And during the Holocaust, they were deported to Transnistria and let to die. He needs to know these sort of things. You need to tell him, but not with hate towards anyone, just with the possibility of healing. I think that would be my answer to that.
Thank you for that recommendation. It sounds really good for all of us in many ways. It's such a layered comment. A new question from Suzanne: is there much intermarriage of Roma and majority Romanians and children of these relationships?
Nico, you want to take this one? I don't want to speak out of terms.
I think the question refers to today's situation, I think, and I don't have any statistics on this. But there are a lot of marriages, and I know a PhD a Roma that he's writing now his PhD on this topic, and his name is Daniel Caraivan, and he is writing about the intermarriages between Roma and Romanians today. But more information on this topic I don't have.
Thank you.
Yeah, well, historically it was a problem, and that connects to some of the and that we believe that there were only anti-Semitic laws that forbade the marriage of Jews and Romanians. But in fact, I did find evidence that suggests by 1944, marriages between Roma and Romanians were outlawed as well. So it's very interesting, because I did not think that they would have gone that far. There were a lot of discussion about it by stopping marriages between Roma and Romanians, but actually, apparently, the law forbade the marriages between Roma and Romanians in 1944. 1944. So that connects to the sources. There is a question about the sources. The sources are used are very diverse. So, you know, from legal texts to radio talks, to poetry, philosophy, and of course historical kind of text, sociological research, and some of what can be said as high culture, like, you know, specialized journals. So that's the other thing I wanted to express, you know, that, you know, it was ultimately something that really intersected with the feelings and behavior with a lot of people. Now, some of it, and that's connected to one comment in the chat about Christianity and the way great historians of Romania understood national identity. So that's one way of approaching that, of course, and we don't have a long history of doing that as researchers, you know, what is called here history from below, or sort of more testimonial history. So interviews with people who lived at the time, what happened to them, but also how the common person reacted to all of these meta theories produced by historians or what scientific minds, whatever you. But it's absolutely clear that there was a certain moment when kind of religious identity for the Romanians, Orthodoxy, became synonymous with who is a Romanian. So a lot of people, like including Nicolae Iorga, one of the, if not the greatest Romanian historian, would create almost an osmosis almost into about this you know, religious Eastern Orthodoxy that's specifically Romanian, or to people similar to Romanians like the Greeks or the Serbs, and kind of what is to be Romanian. And the Jews and clearly the Roma would not fit in there. The problem is different because obviously the Roma, many of them became Orthodox. With the Jews, it's more clear to say, okay, well, you know, you have to convert to Christianity to really become Romanian. So you cannot own property because you're not Christian. Many Jews converted to Christianity, and it took a long time until early 20th century to allow Jews to buy properties in Romania anyway. There was a big debate at the end of the 19th century. With the Roma, it was very different because a lot of the Roma, as you know, after they were freed from slavery, many of them decided basically to embrace various religious denominations. In Transylvania, many of them became Catholic and Greek Catholic. Many of them chose very sort of new denominations. They were very popular at the time. And in the rest of Romania, many of them became Orthodox. And Adrian has wonderful examples of how even within that space, that is the ecumenical space of Romanianness, so we all Christians, we all go to the church, the Roma families are in a different part of the church or in a different church altogether. So we go to the church, but the Roma go to another. The cemetery is for us, and there is another cemetery for the Roma, although they're Orthodox like us. So the moment you are able to create a hierarchy and a separation of people within Orthodoxy in this way, I would suggest that that infiltration of ideas, that kind of digestion of various philosophies of belonging, which were eugenic and racist, had already occurred across the population. So you don't have to be literate then as now to be a purveyor of eugenic and racist ideas. Many of these people weren't. They couldn't read or write, but they could tell that, you know, the Roma is black and is, you know, how you say that, like, it's black as a charcoal, you know, a negru ca tăciunele, yeah, and so on and so forth. That was part of how they would identify a certain group of people, as much as they had certain things to say about the Jews, which didn't come from reading Emil Cioran or Ionescu, but became from their lived experience with a group of people who were always on the margins of Romanianness.
Thank you so much. I think this concludes our event, and we would like to thank our presenters, Marius, Cristina, Adrian, for your contribution, for opening a new path for us to consider for examining and re-examining our biases, our behaviors, our relationships. I personally appreciate that, and I think everyone at Archer does the same. Thank you, Anna, for your contribution and asking questions and walking us through some chapters of the book. I would like to also mention Calvin, who joined us. I didn't see him at the beginning, and I apologize for that, but Calvin is our blog master. I would call him that because he is writing amazing articles on Archer's blog. So let's keep doing what we are doing. I think any seed that we plant is going to grow into something bigger, and hopefully we will, come to see the Romanian diaspora and the Romanian Americans and everyone that we can touch, considering to be more humble and aware of what's happening to all of us and how humans we are. I think one mention that I would like at the end is that everybody is asking about the book availability in the United States. I saw that in the chat. I know in Romania is there. I have it from Romania. I think it's available in UK at Amazon. I searched that, but I have not seen anything in the United States. So if you can, give us some information, Marius, that would be helpful.
Sorry, Mihaela, Marius Taba wanted to put a question. I saw many times he raised.
Okay.
Hand.
I think was the one in the chat or was another one? I'm not sure.
Marius, is there another question you want to ask?
Sorry.
Where are you? No, it's the one in the chat. Is that the one in the chat, Marius?
Yeah, but actually it's in the context because the discussion here, it's indeed very interesting, and this a mixture of views. Christina's work that said that it was a pure intellectual movement and with the support of the Royal Foundation. So then you went towards the interlink with political game and how the opinion was formed and how they look at eugenistic as a state politics. But to me, the Romanian Commission or the Comisiile de Românizare, I don't know how to frame it in English, they were also kind of a third, but to me very important layer of eugeny. So it was the intellectualism, and they had the followers, just to remember the Romanian students attacking the Jewish students in campuses. So it was estimated that it was 80 to 90% of the students somehow joined the movement of eugenism, and their followers were such powerful in mobilizing the masses. But it seems that even there, down at the level of villages, the legionnaire groups, cuiburile de legionari, they were also kind of a deep movement of this intellectual idea. So it wasn't just a fashion like it's now with artificial intelligence. Actually, it had impact at the level of society, and in different layers. Somehow, Comisiile de Românizare, they were embedded nearby the churches, to my sense. And that's why I was saying that they were not just political things, but actually it was their kind of embedment into the Romanian everyday living in villages and in small towns.
Yeah, no, I agree. We're on the same page here. And you can see that very clearly in the examples you gave and also the book. So it demonstrates that. But like I want to say something before we say the book. The problem this is why it's so difficult to have this conversation about Romania, is because the invisible side of Romanian racism, which is the most visible side, is the Roma. So what the Romanian looks in the mirror, what the Romanian doesn't want to see, it's a Roma face. So they could, and they wrote extensively about the Jews and of course the pogroms and the Holocaust, but ultimately they always said our racial problem is never the Jews. The Jews will just get rid of them. The problem with the Roma is that they assimilated and they mixed with us. And then in order to get rid of the Roma, I have to cut off an arm. To get rid of the Jew, I have to get rid of the factory or the shop he owns and send them away. With the Roma, so to use the metaphor, I have to cut my leg, I have to cut my arms because they are part of the national body. And that profoundly altered the way these people, they completely schizophrenic, the way they believed there is something they could do to create what they called Românii de sânge, right? So they could actually find the blood of the Romanians that's uncontaminated by the Roma. So that obsessive search, it's something that remains so profoundly embedded in our society. And that's a very big historical problem for the Romanian society, because it has to deal in a way with it very differently than other societies which have not gone through that. They did not have slaves for 500 years. They did not have deportations. They did not kill 25,000 Roma people and 12,000 children. Where is the stain of the blood of those children on the memory of the Romanian institutions? Now, the book, hopefully, and I hope it will get to America as well, even if I have to bring it there myself, unless they stop me at the border and say, so do you have anything to declare? I say, apart from my beautiful physique, obviously I have 400 copies of In Search of the Perfect Romanian. But there must be another way to bring it to the States. So hopefully you can order it. But as I told Deja in the chat, there will be an English version coming up soon. So in the worst case scenario, you could read it in English if you cannot get your hands. Although it's available on electronic format, so you could buy the PDF. It's very cheap. It's like about $7. So if you go on the site of Polyrom, you could buy the PDF version of the book. And that's very simple. And then you don't need to worry about the physical copy, which you'll get at some point.
Yeah, thank you. That would be great. I think any version would be helpful. The more people can read it in English, possibly. So we welcome that. Thank you so much, everyone. We really appreciate you being here with us. We appreciate all the comments. We are going to save the comments, post them in social media. And please follow us, follow Archer on social media for future events and interesting conversations, sometimes uncomfortable conversations, but so much needed. And I think everyone who is part of Archer can say that we are open for that, and we will, do our best to bring the light in any way possible. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you all. And yeah, it's been a real pleasure.
Thank you, everybody.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.